Hello, welcome to PaynePoints of Interest with Sarah Harbuck. My co-host today is the lovely Kristen Ellis.
Hello.
We want to tell the stories of people and their business and the journey that they are on. Our purpose here at PaynePoints is to gather a new perspective on starting, growing, maturing, and maintaining businesses of all sizes. So grab your coffee and let's have a discussion. All right, today our guest is Ben Harbuck with Black Spot Tattoo Company. Hello, Ben.
Hey, guys.
So Ben started Black Spot back in 2014, kind of as a slap together sort of business. Why don't you give us a few details on that?
So I started Black Spot in 2014. I was actually already running a business. So I ran Standpipe Coffee House we started planning that in 2010 and opened in 2011 in downtown Lufkin. And I had purchased Standpipe Coffee House from my business partner or several business partners in 2013, and I just got really burned out.
Yeah.
I was working 7 days a week and no vacations and 12 to 14 hours a day.
We were building a house at the same time. So.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Don't ever do that, people.
Right?
Don't do that.
It was rough. And so I was talking to my dad one day, and he, his advice, his question to me was, well, what do you really want to do? And I just kind of snapped off, well, I'd really like to open a tattoo shop. And so he was like, well, you should do that then. And so I bought with the help of some local mentors in a way. I was able to purchase a machine and a power supply, and test out tattooing that way. And it really did not work. It really did not feel right in my hand. The way I always describe it is that I needed a hammer and I had a screwdriver, and I didn't have the right tool for the job. And as is kind of my way of doing things, I went back to books. And so I remember Sarah and I took a trip one weekend, and I think she was off in the Stephanie Meyer section. And I was...
It's funny you bring that up today.
Circa 2014.
Yeah.
Or 2000.
Yeah. And so I was looking for books, and I came across a book that said hand poke tattoos. And I was like, no way. And it really just described maybe the 13 to 20 artists that were tattooing without machines in the world. And so I bought the book, and I bought another book.
Was that low of a number?
Yeah, it's not.
There's not very many.
There's very.
I didn't.
Yeah, you might in any given town you might have, or county, depending on how populated it is. You might have 20 people tattooing with machines.
Right.
But to my knowledge, there might only be now, 6 years later, there might only be 20 people in the state of Texas.
Wow.
Tattooing this way. So
If that.
Yeah, so I tried out. I tried it out on myself, and a lot of times when you don't know something, I did go and meet one of the guys from the book, and one of the other apprentices at the time, Katie, went and met one of the girls in the book, and so I flew to San Francisco and met him when he was in the United States.
Yeah.
And she flew to Florida and met her while she was in the United States, because they were originally from Iceland and London, I think.
Wow.
So yeah, I tried it out on myself, and I loved it. I think I tattooed the first time. I tattooed for about 4 hours, and then pushed back the sterile station that I had set up and fell asleep in my chair.
Adrenaline rush.
Needed a break after
yeah,
that.
it was rough. But I really enjoyed it. I had a great time. And so I started learning more and more. And in the course of 6 months, I realized I was just going to have to get a license and start. There was really no way to do it correctly, because it correctly in air quotes, because there was no one to teach me.
Right.
I would have had to go to London
Yeah.
or Iceland, and I can't, stop my business.
When you went to, meet the guy from the book, what
Mm-hmm.
did he have to say? What was his advice, his, guidance for you?
Well, he actually got really upset with me
Oh.
so I got a tattoo from him, and he was tattooing my shoulder, and I told him what my plan was, and he actually got really upset with me. He got angry, and actually got up, took his gloves off, threw them away, and walked out.
Wow.
And it was my first time meeting him, so I was very confused, and his girlfriend was sitting there, and she looked at me and said, he's been talking about doing what you're doing for 10 years, and he hasn't done it, and now he's kind of burned out, and he wants to go open a coffee shop in Reykjavik.
So the complete opposite of your journey.
So I was leaving coffee to start hand poke tattoos, and he was wanting to leave hand poke tattoos to start a coffee shop. Now here we are 6 years later. He still tattoos. But
Good for him.
Yeah, but
Running a coffee shop's no easier. I'll say.
so it was. But I actually went out and had a cigarette with him, and he made it very clear that he wasn't really upset with me. It took him a little off guard that this Texas boy with no education,
Right.
was just doing the thing he had talked about.
Education, school, and the hard knocks of life, I would say, is that you have a degree in that tenfold. So yeah, you've asked the first couple of questions I would normally ask: how you get your business started, what was the first step. You're not, obviously I know some inside information. He's not much of a
You know him a
planner.
little well, yeah.
You just sort of jump into it. But with a business, like this, did you went and talked to people who did it? You got tattooed by them. Was there any sort of sequential business planning strategies, marketing, any of that stuff that you did that was helpful?
Unfortunately, no. I've since realized that when I get interested in something, my habit is to start a business about it.
Yeah.
Which is not a great plan. I would
We would
recommend.
advise not doing that necessarily.
I would recommend to anyone to make a plan before you start. What I tend to do is get into something far enough along to know that I'm interested in it,
And then turn it into a business.
And then I turn it into a business so that I can learn.
Yeah.
Because if that's a very interesting thing. Your question brings up an interesting point, though, that seems to be, to me, I have to have something on the line. Mm-hmm. And that isn't true for a lot of people.
Yeah.
A lot of people need to plan.
Well, you're more of a
Right.
gambler, just in personality.
Right.
Some people are not like that. They're not risk takers, and they need to have everything, all their T's crossed and all their I's dotted, and then they'll start a business.
But for me, if I don't have something on the line, I actually won't learn about it.
Yeah.
So if there's nothing on the line, I'll lose interest in about 72 hours. Mm-hmm. I have to put something, there has to be skin in the game. And if there's skin in the game, then I'll stay. But so that's an interesting thing, is that I feel like I missed a lot of marketing and branding planning, My big thing that I did do was something that I heard from Gary Vee, which was document, don't create. A lot of people get stuck on creating images for their company, or creating, plans for their company, or creating, content. And that's where they get stuck is, well, I don't have any content. And so his big thing was document, don't create, document, don't create, document, don't create. And so what I started doing with Black Spot in the early days, when it was just me, and then it was me and my friend Ray, and then it was me and Ray and Katie, was I documented everything.
Yeah.
So if you go back to the beginning of Black Spot, you're going to see my first 10 tattoos. and they're not great. You're going to see a lot of drawings that are not great.
Right.
But the thing I have now, and that I'm actually very proud of, is I have 6 years of documentation of the process. And I think if you told most people in 6 years you can be not only well respected in your industry, but have a fairly large client base
Right.
from other states, from other countries, even, and love what you do. I wake up in the middle of the night sometimes, have an idea for a drawing, and I'll text Sarah like, "Hey, I'm leaving," and it's 4 a.m. And she wakes up at 7, and she's like, "Why did you leave?" And she'll call me or text me and be like, "Well, I had this idea for this drawing. I had this idea for this thing. I had to go to work."
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, but isn't that artists?
Yes, very much.
They'll
Yeah.
just figure
Yeah.
something out at a weird time, and they go do it, and you have to do it then, or else you lose it.
You lose that when when inspiration strikes. You have to.
I feel like a business that's based all around art isn't going to necessarily be planned out perfectly, because you're going with your instinct or your feelings or your gut on it, and it's maybe doesn't make sense in a larger sense in terms of what you should do right business wise.
Right.
But ultimately you create something that out of this chaos, this beauty and chaos, that it wasn't perfect. You said maybe you should have done some better planning with your marketing and branding, and maybe that's hindered you in some ways in the present, but you can overcome that by creating a community and being passionate about what you do, liking what you do,
Right.
and that comes across to people.
But I mean, when you say quote unquote the right way to start a business, or that's going to be different.
Yeah,
It's going to be different for everybody. That's going to be different
Personality
for
types do things differently,
for every person,
yeah.
depending on the industry you're in, the type of business you're trying to start. If you're not doing what's right for you and what's right for your business, then your business isn't going to succeed.
right.
I think
And
it's
obviously, we should disclaim that yes, any legalities or tax kind of stuff is a
Well,
standard
yeah,
across the board.
Exactly. That's
but
not what we're talking about.
that's not really what we mean here. But yeah. So with all of that, what would you say have been some of y'all's biggest struggles or obstacles with Black Spot?
well, because I didn't have a plan, we spent a lot of money. That's a tendency of mine, is to throw money at a problem, and sometimes that's not money I have. Also, we struggled with our budget, and we also struggled with the tax thing. And so actually I hired my brother in the second year of Black Spot to start managing my finances and handling. I think he hired a CPA for me.
Yeah.
And that had a huge impact. We were going to be under a massive tax burden, and between my brother and the CPA, they came up with a way, to restructure the company, and things that I don't even know about. I think a guest on y'all's podcast before, David Saphir, has talked about some of the things you can do. Some of how much money I spent in the early days, though, I'm still having to pay that off. 6 years in, it's not over. It's I made some pretty large mistakes, and that happens when you're starting a business. So
Right.
I would say that one of the biggest struggles was that I didn't hire the right people
In the beginning?
in the beginning, and as we've grown, I've hired different people for different things.
That's something we run into a lot, finding the right people to fill the right role.
Because
in
you're
your
not much of
business.
an organized individual, and you don't like bookkeeping, you don't like doing numbers, but yet you were trying to do it anyway. And the biggest thing we see with people, their failures, is when they try to do something they're not good at. And if they would just hire somebody to fill that gap, they're gonna, number one, not feel the stress of
Right.
dealing with
Right.
that particular part of the business, but also too, because they've hired someone who is good at that, that's their expertise, that's their, that's what they do best. Their business is going to run a lot more efficiently.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that takes setting your ego back a little bit too.
Sure. That's hard.
You have to
It can
have
be
to
very hard, yes.
recognize, a lot of us, I think being Americans also, we're taught to just work hard,
Yeah.
but we're
If you
not
work
told.
hard enough, you can do anything. Get
Right.
it done.
Exactly.
It
And we're
doesn't
not
mean you're going to enjoy it while you're doing it.
right. And it also doesn't mean you're going to be good at it.
Right.
And so I would say, well, recently we just hired a shop manager. And one of the things that she said before she came on was that I was spending 80% of my time doing things I wasn't good at. And that I was spending 20% of my time doing things I was good at. And if I would flip those, our business would run better. And interestingly enough, we took her to a music festival that we tattoo at, and we doubled our money from what we made last year to what we made this year in 3 days at that music festival. It was up. That's crazy to me.
Because
And
you
I
spent the time doing what you
And
were
see,
good at.
I tried to say that a couple of years back, but I didn't say it in a way that he could hear it. That would be like, oh, the light bulb goes off, you know?
Right.
I was just like, you don't need to be doing that. Let somebody, you know. And she said it in a way that he goes, oh,
Yeah.
it was a different. It was a
okay.
different. It was a different communication style.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that isn't a criticism of you, because
No.
when you worked you worked with Black Spot for 2 years, and in that 2 years we also doubled our money.
no,
When-
actually
and-
quadrupled it.
Yeah. No, that's
It didn't
true.
we started so low. That sounds so impressive, but if you think about it, when you start out at such a low amount and you quadruple that, it ended up being where it should have been to begin with.
But
know.
that's what gave me the idea in the beginning to even try to hire someone.
Yeah.
Was that when you came on and you were organized,
Right.
it wasn't that I could change my personality.
Right.
I can't.
Yeah.
Really.
You needed
And
to find the right person. To
Part of my
fill that
issue was
role
I
that
was
would
trying to
work.
get him to change, where I should have just done that role more myself. Ooh, I just hit the microphone. Do that role more myself, and then take some of that stuff off of him. And Marky came in and said it in a different way, made it a lot more, sometimes, with your spouse, you don't always communicate
yeah,
very well.
absolutely.
And so she said it in a way that he goes, oh, I should have done this. And, I feel like it's only to the betterment of any business when you hire somebody who is going to help you succeed, help you run your business more efficiently, and tell you straight up to your face, you're terrible doing this. Please go over here and do this instead.
You got to have somebody that can tell you right.
I think you hit on a really important part, though, of hiring the right people. Is that, what was difficult with me and you, I think you hit on it. You were trying to change me.
Yes.
Instead of I
Take
don't
on the
want
role
to be critical,
myself. Yeah.
but do what you're good at.
Right.
Because
Exactly.
this isn't
Yeah.
the first time that you've taken over a business. Or not taken over, but this isn't
Helped
the first.
assist.
This isn't the first time you've been hired to organize.
Right.
Organize and
You have a
streamline.
long history of that, actually.
True.
And the profit always increases. But a lot of times what people get into is they go, well, this person's trying to change me, or you get into trying to change the owner. Whereas when you can move your ego to the side,
Right.
you recognize that I can hire this person to do this job, but I have to trust them to do that job.
Yes.
Right.
You have to let go of that.
And
control.
that was part of our issue is, this was your business, and relinquishing some of that control to someone else. While yes, I'm your wife and we've been together for a long time, there's a little bit of a pause, and I don't blame you. I feel like that's anybody's
Yeah.
issue. There are things that I kind of put in place that you guys implement now that help streamline your business. But there is a certain point where you have to hire somebody who is going to just do that job rather than, and I think there was some miscommunication on our part, I thought I was trying to help you. And in essence, what you needed to say, but didn't know you needed to say was, I just need you to do it,
Right.
So I think it's obviously you gotta grease the wheel, and you gotta go through the process, and you gotta do the things. And now, here we are 3 years later, and you're like, okay, I know I need this person to just do those things.
Right.
But I also know now that when they do them their way, I have to stay out of the way.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
other words, tattooing, the art of tattooing without a machine definitely needs to be done my way. Okay? Because I'm the most experienced at it. I have I know what turns out good and what doesn't.
Right.
But when it comes to organization, the crew will come to me now and go, hey, we're going to do this. And I almost always go, okay, I have this question about it. They answer that question about it. And then I go, okay, great. Do it.
Right.
There you go.
And they say, well, is this the way you would do it? And I go, I don't have a way I would do it. If I was going to do it, I would have done it already.
Yeah, I think that's I think that's just the growing pains of experiencing certain things in certain ways, knowing okay, that's not going to work for future reference,
Right.
or I need to do it this way instead.
Right.
On that note, what aspect of this business has taught you the most about yourself or about running a business, besides what we've already kind of discussed? Is there anything else to add?
I think, the way I would answer that question today is probably doubling and tripling down on what you're good at. It's such a hard thing to not listen to the noise of your own mind that I'm not good at this and seeing it as a weakness rather than hiring someone
Finding someone to fill that role. Yeah.
and then focusing on what I'm good at,
Yeah.
because that's what's working the best.
Yeah.
When I work the room, we make more money. When I work the room, we do better tattoos. When I work the room, the employees, the crew, they're all happy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Versus when I try to spend my time doing something that I'm not necessarily good at. And then maybe we don't make as much money.
Right.
Or the crew isn't happy. Or the tattoos turn out not so great. And so I think when it comes to what I've learned the most, that would be to trust your instincts, and then double and triple down on what you're good at. That and then hire the right people, because if you do that, then you can spend more time doing what you're good at. You can spend more time trusting your instinct, and it creates a synergy between the whole team.
I have a kind of a supplemental question on that note. A lot of people you would talk to in business will be like, but I can't afford it. I can't afford to hire somebody else. What
Yeah.
advice do you have for someone who is thinking that? Well, yeah, I'm terrible at this thing, and yeah, I'd love to hire somebody, but I can't afford it. What do you say to them?
From my perspective, every time I have hired someone, I have immediately seen a change in the business, but I've also seen that I now have more time.
And time is money.
Yes.
Time is money. And so, in other words, if I just hired a CPA and then stood out on the corner talking with my friends, I would spend money and I would make less.
Yeah.
So the key is recognizing where your time is, what your intuition is on what you're good at, and then doubling down on that. So with my free time, I've been doing a lot more art. With my free time, I've been doing a lot more marketing.
Or the time that you used to be spending on all these minutia details that were not your strong suit.
Right.
Correct.
Because I wouldn't necessarily call it free time. You're spending it more wisely.
Yeah, well, but like doing payroll
Right.
takes me about 8 hours.
Yeah, that's dumb.
Whereas for someone who's good at numbers
Right.
and math, doing payroll takes 45 minutes.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now I would say what I'm calling free time is that 7 hours and 15 minutes.
Right.
Right.
That I didn't have.
Right.
But that doesn't mean I'm just going to not use that time now. What that means is now I can get in another client. I can do another drawing. I can document more things we're doing throughout the day. And I can really work harder to assist my team in hand poking tattoos. One of the things I haven't really gone over yet, if you don't mind, is just the difference. Machines and power supplies are the way we've been tattooing since the Sailor Jerry era, which
Yeah.
is post World War II. And in the last 20 years even, tattoo artists would have to solder their own needles, attach it to that machine, turn on the power supply, and that machine would make 50 to 100 dots, if you will, per second. Whereas what I'm doing is 5 to 6 dots per second,
Right.
because I'm
Yeah.
attaching the needle which I do not solder on my own, by the way. It's 2020.
They
so,
come hermetically sealed.
Right. I attach it to a chopstick just to have something to hold on to. I set up a sterile station. That generally means to me changing gloves 3 times in the setup because I'm going to be going from an unsterile cabinet
Right.
to a sterile station. So I tend to change gloves more than most people. And then once the client is there in the chair, has filled out all the appropriate paperwork, I show them the hermetically sealed needle. I take it out, I attach it to the chopstick, we change gloves again, we wash hands again, we put new gloves on, and we begin tattooing dot by dot.
Yeah.
It's a very different process. I don't think it's for everyone. I love machine tattoos. I think they're phenomenal.
Yeah.
But I like that this is less invasive because it's 5 to 6 dots per second.
Yeah.
That means your body takes less time to heal. And contrary to public opinion, if you are in Hawaii getting a tap tattoo, it does probably hurt. I haven't done that myself.
Yeah.
But I have heard and read many reports of it being extremely painful.
But it's also a different technique than what you're doing.
Correct. It's more of a tapping an old tribal technique.
Right.
Kind of hammering it into you.
Exactly. Yeah.
Whereas what we're doing is more of a soft, gentle tap.
Right.
These tattoos last just as long. I'm sitting here
That
in
used to
front
be
of
a
you.
very frequent question.
Really?
How long does a tattoo last? And I would just stand there baffled, like, what do you
Forever?
mean? How long does it last? It's a tattoo.
But you have to remember where the hand poke industry started, which was
true.
high school.
Yeah. These
That's
kids
true.
doing
Kids-
stuff in their basement. I get
Kids
it.
in high school
Yeah.
tattooing the bottom of their feet
And
to
they
show
didn't-
their friends.
Yeah, and they didn't know what they were doing, and so it did fall out after a while because it didn't go deep enough.
Oh yeah, I had
But-
a little heart on my ankle with the scratch.
Safety pin.
With this, scratch with a safety pin,
Yeah.
and then put some
Yeah.
pen, some
Yeah.
big ink pen,
That was real
ink, and
scary.
super safe. It's awesome.
Yeah, but that's the thing. That's where it starts.
Yeah,
and
sure.
That's as long as there have been people, there have been tattoos.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
we've always found a way. I mean, a lot of the
Right.
Native Americans were using, especially before metal came around, they were using either stones to make cuts, or they were using bushes, like the thorns.
Oh, yeah.
On a
Yeah.
bush, they were making an ink, the
Okay.
same ink that they would stain their clothing with, and they were taking that thorn and tapping or pricking a design.
Yeah.
So it's really cool. There's the book that I got that I referenced earlier was Drawing with Great Needles, and it's a book put out by the University of Texas that highlights all the tattoo bundles that have been found for the past 200-300 years in what is now known as the United States. It's very, very cool. I like it a lot. So there's just I love history like that, and it's just a very different process.
Yeah.
You don't walk into our shop and see a lot of naked ladies. You don't walk into our shop and get a lot of heavy metal. You don't walk into
It's
our
not
shop.
dark
No, it's very
and it's very bright and clean and
I feel like that's also,
open
that has broken down sort of the stereotype, the way y'all have set this shop up.
Yeah.
And the way, the music that's playing is very, very different than what you're used to if you go into an actual traditional tattoo shop. And the type of clientele you have here is now more what you would deem the soccer mom set versus these biker guys or ex-prison, ex-cons coming in.
Right.
It's a whole different world now. And I feel like because when you walk into the shop, you're not assaulted by that buzz of the needle and the
Yeah.
machine making that noise, which is always a little unnerving.
it's a much calmer atmosphere.
It's quiet.
Right.
People are always surprised. I thought it was going to hurt really bad.
Yeah.
And, my high school, one of my best friends from high school, she recently got a tattoo before this whole COVID thing started. And she was not one that I would imagine is very high on the pain tolerance scale. And she was real worried about that. But it was very important to her to get this tattoo to commemorate her mother who had passed away from cancer. And and she was really nervous and thought it was going to be really bad. Sat down and goes, "Oh my goodness, this is it.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is all there is."
When I got mine, and everybody told me because mine is on my wrist, it's very near
So was
that.
hers.
It's very near that bone, that wrist
Yeah.
bone. Everybody said, "Do it closer to the bone. It's gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt." I was like, but I want to see it. That's where I want it. I want to be able to see it, And so that's what I did. And I remember when Sarah,
Yep, I did it.
did my
I tattooed
tattoo,
it.
and you kept saying, "Are you okay?" And I was like, I can barely feel it.
Yeah.
Like it's not,
Yeah.
The shock that they have that it's not as painful as they expected, because for whatever reason people think that because you're doing it by hand it's going to hurt so much more, and it's
Yeah.
like you're being cut like a razor blade with a machine.
Right.
This is like being pricked with a safety pin.
Yeah.
Very different
Yeah.
feeling.
It was-
So I feel like what you guys have been able to achieve here is breaking some of those stereotypes, and now the type of people who come in and get tattoos are people like me and Kristen, who are not what you would associate typically as tattooed up people.
No.
Yeah, I think that goes back again probably to my childhood. I was homeschooled, and so I didn't have a lot of friends. And then we were home churched also, so it wasn't like there were 400 people at the church.
Yeah.
It was more along the lines of there were 4 families. So I saw the same people for 10 years. And it became very apparent to me, when I got out in the big world, like, wow, every group of people, every tribe, every community, they have the same issues. So if you've been in a business meeting of a Baptist church, you've also been in the same experience could be had at a biker bar.
Yeah.
Where they're having different issues, but they're really the same because the people are the same.
Right. People
And-
are people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
so they are, and so that's where you just go, wow, how do I be more inclusive? How do I create a situation where people don't feel judged to walk into my shop? I was kind of blown away several years ago when I started riding motorcycles, and I found out very quickly. I was educated by the old men in the motorcycle industry that there's a correct way to do it, and there are all these rules, and there are all this, and I was thinking, like, what about Rebel Without a Cause? What about what about Made in America, born in the USA?
Yeah.
What about Dennis Hopper? What about
You associate motorcycles with rebellion, and yet
And
there's all these
freedom
rules and
and-
structure to it,
right.
and it's like, what? That kind of goes against the whole
and
premise.
I felt the same way about coffee shops. People would be like, well, this is not how Starbucks does it. And it's like,
So?
I know, but Starbucks is Starbucks. We're not at Starbucks. We're here. And then the same with tattoos. People would be like, well, you have to do a tattoo correctly and appropriately. And I'm thinking, but isn't this a rebellious thing?
Outside of the sanitation
Right.
issues, what's
Yeah.
the right way?
Right.
Seriously.
It's different for every client, for every artist,
And I think it's different for every culture.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you go to Japan, Tabori is still a thing, but now the old masters use machines for their line work, and then they traditionally do the filler and the color. And so it just, I think, it goes back, I forget who asked this question, but there's a quote, each generation must answer the oldest questions in the world their own way. And that's a really bad paraphrase, I think, of an older philosopher. But I think, to me, that's what I've taken that to pretty much every business I've run is, okay, well, I understand they did it this way. Let's take the good, leave the bad.
Right.
And how do we answer this question?
Well, and especially in a small business, and because there are, referencing the coffee shop, because Starbucks is such a big thing, you have to find what's going to set you apart, and what's going to draw the people that don't necessarily care for Starbucks. What's going to be the different atmosphere, what's going to be, the hole you're going to fill to make your business successful. So
Correct.
it's a big issue with small businesses in lots of different
In
industries.
observing, just, I would say your biggest achievement, or one of the biggest achievements you guys have here, is that inclusivity. Would you agree with that? Like, including people in the tattoo shop, the coffee shop, this appealing to a group that had been either overlooked or marginalized, or people who, wouldn't necessarily normally feel comfortable coming to a place like this all of a sudden are coming in droves with their friends. Do you feel like that's...
Yeah, I feel like that's accurate. I think that we want as many people to experience a good thing as can, as long as they're willing. And again, this is I'm almost going against what I said a second ago. As long as they're willing to play within the rules. There are very few rules though at Black Spot, and one of the rules is be nice.
Yeah.
It's not. If you come in and within the first 30 minutes you've told me 3 things about your other artist, then I'm going to try to, as politely as I can, send you back to that artist, because it seems like you would be happier there.
That's a societal thing. We as a society need to be reminded of the golden rule.
Yeah.
Yeah. We all learned in kindergarten, but treat others the way you would want to be treated.
But we need a reminder now. All of a sudden, it seems like in today's world, like there's just this lack of empathy and kindness that people, or they're just completely clueless. And they say and do things, and maybe they don't do it maliciously, but you're just kind of like, are you tone deaf to the situation in the world? Like, what's happening here?
I think it's just sometimes we have so much going that we forget that people are different, and that we forget that it's that difference that makes us want to be involved with them or want to work with them. Your previous podcast with Loud House CrossFit, I thought CrossFit was a cult. CrossFit people were crazy, man. Like 10 years ago,
they were so out of the loop. I've never really had that impression about CrossFit.
Yeah, no,
I've never gotten that.
I was like, I will never go to CrossFit. And then one weekend, I tattooed Jason and Amanda, and I got to talk to them about it. And I was like, oh wow.
They're not crazy at all. They're normal people.
This is actually really cool. They're doing it for very good reasons. And they're very open to people not coming. They're they recognize that people don't always have the money. There's there's a lot of things about it that it's like, wow, well, you're running your business the way I run my business. Maybe we could partner up.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a good thing.
Would you do anything differently? Was there anything that you've looked back and gone, you know what, I think I could have done this differently? Or as you've done the process, you've learned those mistakes and you've corrected them, or you've changed them to the betterment?
With my next business, I'll definitely hire the right people faster.
From the get-go.
From the get-go.
Yeah.
Absolutely, I'll do that. The other thing is, I think I'll be less... How about I say it this way? Next time I'm going to trust myself more.
Yeah.
I think I spent the first 2 or 3 years questioning whether or not I was right. Mm-hmm. And I think
You're
now...
too in your head at the time.
Yeah, and I think
that's... But, starting a business is scary. A lot of people fall into that.
Except that wasn't his first business. It was like his 10th. So it was like, why are you so in your head about this? But I think for you, specifically with this particular business, if I may... there was a bigger connection with this on a just like a psychological level for you than with any other business you've ever done or been a 100%. Part of. And so I feel like you were so much more in your head than you could have been, because you this was like something
this was my thing.
You loved so much, and you wanted it to be successful, but at the same time you almost were a self-fulfilling prophecy by shooting yourself in the foot in a few places here and there because of that.
Yes.
And so with that in mind, what advice do you have for other people who are starting their business or are struggling to run their business, going forward?
Well, if you're starting a business, I would say make a plan. And people get hung up on this a lot. They look at Pinterest and they see 78 ways to do a business plan. Just write out a plan. Yeah. Talk about it over the kitchen table.
Even if it's just the basic, in 5 years I want to have X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
It's what if we don't sell 78 cups of coffee? What if we don't do 100 tattoos? What then? That can be the plan. You can draw arrows and put boxes, or you can use Post-it notes, or however it is for you, but make a plan. The second thing would be trust yourself. Trust yourself fully and write down what you trust. Have someone interview you. Have a spouse or a significant other or a friend.
Yeah.
You're starting a business. Have them interview you on why you want to do this over the kitchen table.
Well, and one of the things you've brought up before when we've talked is talking to people within your industry, but then talking to people outside of your industry
Right.
and getting advice from a wide range of people rather than just a very small like circle or a little bubble that, gives you better perspective.
A lot about how I tattoo today honestly has to do with the input from plumbers and construction people and graphic designers and programmers. And, a lot about the way we run our business has a lot to do with other creatives who are passionate about their industry, but they're not necessarily tattoo artists.
Right.
And then hire people. Just hire the right people to do the right things. You're going to be able to work so much faster at what you want to do.
Yeah.
Because I see myself tattooing at 80 years old.
Sure.
I don't. This is
Right.
the first time I've worked on something that I don't see myself leaving. I do see myself starting other businesses, but I don't see leaving this. So
What would you what do you think your next business is going to be?
I appreciate you asking that because I actually I came up with an idea on Friday, and I've basically been awake since Friday. It's Monday morning. I basically have been working on this pretty solid since then. I realized last week that I haven't really ventured into e-commerce.
Okay.
So selling things online.
Right.
Yeah, all my businesses have almost always been service related. And bringing
Or
people
brick and
together.
mortar stores.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I really want, I realized that I really wanted to venture into e-commerce. So right now I'm planning, I don't want to say too much about it, but I'm basically putting together several of my passions, coffee, tattoo culture,
Okay.
and IT programming, technology. I'm putting those three together, and I'm going to try to build an e-commerce brand. I'm not going to try. I'm doing it currently. So yeah, it's gonna be very exciting. But still, even with that, I see that as it's a passion, right? But it's a side project.
It's also born out of kind of a need with the way the world is now, and everybody's kind of been at
Right.
home, and you can't run a business a traditional way. Was there did that factor in?
It did, because with what's going on in the world today, we don't know if we're going to see a second wave of this or a third wave of this.
Right.
We don't know. I don't like all the references to 1920. I have to remind people, guys, we didn't use toothbrushes then. We did,
World
We
is
know
very different
so
place.
much more.
Right. We didn't have washing machines. You literally had
Right.
to have someone out in the
Wash
backyard, and you didn't know if that water was clean or not. There's so
Yeah.
much different. There's so many good things. And I'm going to reference Gary Vee to kind of finish my thought. He tweeted out a little while ago, "I've never seen so much good coming from so much pain."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I retweeted it, and I shared it on Facebook, and I just thought, that is a really incredible thing, because we're all aware that this is impacting different states on different levels. And I just really think that there's a lot of good things happening.
Well, it's the challenging times that really
Right.
make
Bring
us
out-
rise up.
It brings
So-
out the best and the worst in people, but I do feel like I've seen a lot of creativity, a lot of innovation, a lot of kindness, a lot of empathy, and wonderful things that have been coming out of this. Not just the
And
you
good
just
will
have to-
always overweigh any of the bad, typically.
Absolutely.
So-
I think so. I think it. I say a lot. Kindness always wins on all my social media forums, and I get some pushback from that. A lot of people actually do DM me and say, "I don't believe you," or
Well,
"I haven't
keep
seen
waiting,
it."
because it's going to happen.
Well, that's my thing. I feel like they're looking at their life in the first quarter.
Yeah.
If you reference a football game. We can all reference that horrific last season the Houston Texans had when they were up 24-0
And they
in the
lost.
first quarter, and a bunch of us who had been enjoying football for a long time were going, oh no, this is the perfect storm. And sure enough, slow and steady won the race.
But that just goes to illustrate that your life is not defined by the beginning
No.
Right.
so much as it is by the process and the end result.
The journey is the
So, well, I think that's going to wrap it up for us today. Thank you, Ben, for coming by and taking some time out of your very busy schedule to talk to us.
Absolutely. I had a great time.
We thank everybody for listening. I'm interested to hear everybody's response to today's interview and for you guys to tell each other your stories and to send us yours. If you would like to be a guest on our podcast and share your story, please contact us at our website, PaynePoints.com, or any of our social media. Guys, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Bye.